Welcome, everybody. We are officially launching week 2. This week, we will be focusing on staffing. Just a few housekeeping rules. Thank you all for your participation in our discussions last week. There was some really interesting examples within all of your different work streams that I think are going to be very relevant for this week. So I am very excited to get started. All right, you guys, let's dive right into it. So the beginning of the employee life cycle is staffing. It's how you source your candidates. It's how candidates are recruited. What does it look like when they apply? How are they interviewed? How do you hire? Who do you hire? Are they staying? Are they being retained? And what does it look like? That whole process. Recruiting is, in my opinion, the one part of human resources that has the largest impact on everything else that comes. How we recruit, how we measure, how we show our value in that recruiting function can help pave the way for every other thing you need, for bonuses, for pay, for benefits, for training, for development. And what's very interesting is in many organizations I have personally worked in, recruiting is not in HR. It sits in a different function. It sits quote unquote in the business. And there's a reason for that. And in my opinion, the reason for that is because we haven't shown our value in human resources. The business gets frustrated with human resources or feels that human resources is more of an admin function and pulls it out and puts it quote unquote where it should be in the business. Well, if we are the business, we should be owning the recruiting function. So when you look at your recruiting functions in your organizations, the most important thing for you to look at is, how do you source? How do you interview? How do you hire? And are those hires good hires? 60% of an organizational's costs are spent on people. That is a Forbes number. That's a number in the book. That's a number that you will find on, Mercer and Hayes and Watson Wyatt, and you name it, you're going to find that statistic all over the place. Recruiting is going through an entirely different change management requirement of itself, right? Not only did the author talk about the changing of the economy, right? We're going to have to focus on the quality of hires and the recruiters themselves. The recruiters themselves, our entire recruiting way that we know it has to change. Do we have a bench, right? Do we have people who can pull up into someone else's role if they leave, if they retire, if they want another job? What is your employee value proposition at your company? Do you have one? Do you know what it is? Do you have a talent pool? So really, really good companies, you see this in the Silicon Valley a lot, will have jobs that are posted that aren't even really jobs that are available. And the reason they do that is because they're looking for good talent all the time. So they have this strong talent pool that at any time they can pull from. How removed are the HR silos in your process? So is everything very fragmented? Is it this person sources and this one recruits and this one interviews and this one hires and then they go to onboarding and everyone's not talking to each other? So when I ran HR at Western Dental, I had my team put in what was called pods. So I had the recruiter sit with the HR business partner, sit with the associate relations team, and so forth. And the reason I did that is because they supported a business function. And that way, if we had talent that was going to be promoted or demoted or terminated or whatever, the recruiting team and the HR business partner team were constantly talking so that we could say, okay, how do we add value? How do we think strategically? How do we think proactively? How can we make sure that we are anticipating the needs of the business with whatever's happening so that we can source, retain, attract, whatever it is as a group? And that's a big deal because you don't see it happen as much as it should. Seems simple, doesn't happen as much. And then do we know our priorities? Because sometimes we could be hiring for the wrong things. think the chapter talks a lot about the cost associated with having vacant positions or focusing on the wrong positions, right? If you have these key positions that are open, they can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Those need to be where your resources are moved to. You can't be all things to all people unless you're working for a company that has a budget that is infinite and there isn't the need for the lift and shift of resources. So those are the things that we need to think about in this changing economy. We need to just assess the staff, not only internally, our recruiting staff and our recruiting processes and our recruiting systems, our recruiting policies. We need to know how we recruit, where we recruit, how do we interview, who do we interview, and how do you identify if it was a good hire afterwards. So I'm going to give you a couple examples on the actual recruiting piece. This is really big going on in the industry right now. How many of you have interviewed for a job where you apply online and that application process takes 30, 40 minutes? So many companies do not measure how many candidates click on their job and then drop off because they have a cumbersome applying process. How many of you have done the online cumbersome job application and then when you go in to apply, they still make you fill out a paper form? How many of you have had to go in and interview 3 or 4 different times? Right? If you have good candidates, they have jobs. And people who have jobs can't be leaving their jobs all the time. People who are kind of casually looking, they're not going to spend 30 to 45 minutes looking and filling out your application. And then who interviews? Do you have a structured interview? Do you do interview guides? Are you more off the cuff? You want to be careful, right? If you're off the cuff, things you can and cannot say. And then when you are interviewing, how are you assessing if the interview went well? You know, the old school one size fits all interview guides, right? I used to love interview guides, right? I'm an operational person. It's fair, it's consistent. The interview guide used to be one type of interview guide. Frustrates managers. Why? Because what I'm looking for might be different than what the manager's looking for, which might be different than what the team's looking for. So in my team, and this happened actually today as I'm recording this, we interviewed someone for one of my benefit specialist roles. Not only do I interview, but my entire team interviews, not just the manager, not just my director, everyone who's going to work for that and work with that person interviews them. And each of them come to the table with 2 situational questions that are really important to them. And then everyone has a round robin of questions they ask about just culture fit, right? Are you going to fit in with this group? That's really important to me because you can train technical things. You can pretty much train technical stuff. Things you can't usually train are grit. How do you interview out grit? How do you interview out what I call scrappiness? In my organization, you have to be really scrappy. How do you interview out sales techniques? How do you interview out culture? So those things are super important, and a lot of times they get passed up, right? And then when you go to that quality of hire, you get managers who feel like it's not a good fit or they can't do their job. And maybe it's not that they can't do their job. They might not fit within the culture of your organization. Or maybe your culture needs an organizational shift, and this is your data that you can use for that. So all those things really need to be thought through when you're looking at what you're going to measure. The one thing I'm going to tell you about staffing measurements, there's so much you can measure, right? There was how many pages this week that you're going to read, and it's overwhelming. And I don't want you to get so caught up in, oh my gosh, I need to run out and do all these things, because that would be the worst thing for you to do. You do not want to run out and do all these things. What you want to do is you want to focus on a few things, a few key metrics that you can measure and you can tell a story with. This is where you're going to want to know if you are an HR leader or you want to be an HR leader or you are a generalist and you are doing recruiting. You want to look at your own internal house and say, what am I measuring today? Maybe it's for your own needs. So in my organization, we do some of the things he says not to do, right or wrong. We measure time to fill. And we measure time to fill because open positions cost us a lot of money, right? We have agencies, we are selling food demos. Our clients get really ticked off if we're not filling those positions quick enough. So we measure the time to fill, but we're not measuring the quality of that fill. So what my ask, right? I don't oversee that function, but as a member of an HR leadership team, my ask to that leader is, let's now look at a small group of people and what's the quality. So we know we've reduced our time to fill. That's great. But are we filling them with warm bodies or are we filling with capable bodies? And then the next thing we did is we decided to look at how are we rewarding our managers and how are we rewarding our recruiting team for this time to fill metric. Because we had unintended consequences. We were rewarding off of how quickly they could fill a role. So guess what was happening? Anyone off the street that had a heartbeat was getting a job. We're going to shift that to start increasing the how long are they staying? People past 30, 60, 90 days. Are they a good quality hire? The other thing the author talks a lot about is how much of your function is being done by the managers. It's important that recruiting is done by the managers. I'm not saying them going through LinkedIn or going through Indeed. What I'm saying is helping select the staff, interview the staff, helping internally promote their roles within their team so that you're getting referrals and references and all those different things. Those are really, truly important items when we're looking at staffing. So let's go on to the next slide. So next I'm going to talk about really putting first things first, which are assessments. And there are pages and pages of checklists and assessments and strategies and ideas that the author gives you for recruiting. To boil it down, recruiting cannot be owned just by HR. HR in many organizations becomes the cop or the police, and we need to shift that to being someone that is more of a consultant. We want to give our input on our advice and the tools and the resources so that the managers can make some of the best hiring decisions that they can. So you need to assess your managers, because if you have low-hanging fruit performing managers, they're not going to hire people who are better than them. If your managers do not know how to hire, then you're going to continue to be in this really ugly cycle. So it has to start with looking at your recruiting tools and practices first. So on page 37 of the book, there is a great checklist that has a slew of different things to look at. And it says, look at these 13 items, and if you can say yes to them, then you are towards a world-class employment function. I can tell you, I personally have never worked for an organization that could probably say yes to maybe half of them. We could probably all off the top of our head spit out, the best companies to work for that might be in your head. For me, I think of things like Amazon and Google and Facebook. But at the same time, I know enough people in their HR orgs to know that no company, right? Not everything is greener. There are great things about companies. There are things that need to be improved about companies and so forth. So being a quote unquote world-class employment function, it takes time because it can't be just the function. It has to be the culture of the organization. When I look at the practices, I think the biggest thing you want to look at and understand is the importance of compensation and rewards when it comes to staffing. So when you're measuring how well you do things, what you need to remember, if you're not rewarding or compensating the hires or the people hiring correctly, you're never going to get to where you need to be. So if you are an employer who hires at the 30th percentile, you need to understand that you're not going to get the caliber of hire at the 90th percentile. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that is what it is. If you are an employer who has been hiring at a lower percentile, you can benchmark all this data. You're not going to be given, I doubt, a tree of money to move everybody up. So this is when you bring value, where you can look at your organization and say, business, where is the majority of the revenue going to be driven from? They're going to tell you. You're going to say, okay, we need to focus on that part of the organization. Let's bench the associates that are working in this part of the organization. Who's above, who's below. If we've just said that everyone's at the 30th percentile, everyone's below the bench, we're going to say, all right, Who are the most important key players and why? We're going to get those names and we're going to say, all right, let's make sure that it matches what you're thinking. Is there revenue that they're bringing in, or is the product development that they're bringing in, or the new business that they're bringing in truly supporting the reason you think that these people are the best? And it's not just because, they've been your best friend for 20 years. Then from there, you can put your resources and your allocations to those people. So again, going back to chapter 1, this is the peanut butter spread. You can't always peanut butter spread. If you are like me, I love to go into organizations that need fixing and need advice and strategy, and they're not all built. So if I went in and told my CFO, well, you're going to need to give me $20 billion so that we can give everybody at the 50th percentile, he would just turn me away and shut the door. You need to be strategic and when you're looking at things. So compensation and rewards, you want to look at, where are you paying? At what? These are things you have to know. At what level are you paying? Where are your benefits at? Do you want to be a company that people come because of your benefits, or do you want to be a company because it's like not even a question? Like, yep, they are what they are. They're benchmarked. They're not above. They're not below. It's a moot point. Do you want to be a company that's known for what? So the organization I work for, compensation and benefits, we're kind of middle of the road. It's not going to make or break a hire. The reason people like coming to our company is because the exposure you're going to get working for a 100,000 person company that still runs like a small business, that works with clients from Pepsi Cola to Mars to Unilever, from Amazon to Disney. We develop apps, we do TV ads, we broker food in a grocery store, we hand out your demos and do makeup at Sephora kind of thing. That's why. It's the exposure of something that big. And you're going to learn, and you're going to learn on your feet, and you're going to grow, and you're going to grow on your feet. That's our employee value proposition. And because that proposition is so good, we might not have to hire at the 90th percentile. Now, we know where we need to, right? We have a very clear understanding of what positions need to be what. Where we fall short sometimes in my organization is we don't reward correctly in the recruiting team. So we've been working a lot on that over the last probably 18, 24 months, and I'm really excited to see what it's delved and what we've created from it. But you have to assess how you utilize your current tools and practices. You need to go through that checklist and look and say, do 50% of my hires come from referrals? Because if people are going to refer their friends to work for the company, guess what? They're going to stay at the company. You're going to want to know, do we track and show the performance of the employees we hire, and do we report it to the managers? You've got to toot your own horn. You're not going to be able to do all these things at once. And I would doubt to say even the best of the best organizations do all of these. It would be metric overload, right? This is one facet of lots of different areas in HR. As a head of HR, I'd pick one or two from each category. But if I ran this function, I'd probably want to measure all of it. So at any time, if I needed to influence, I would have those metrics at my side. So the next is the strategy. You want to talk about not just the tools and the resources that you're doing. You want to look at your broader strategy. These are the things I was talking about earlier. Is it really hard to apply for your company? Do people know who your company is? Are the goals that you're working on aligned with the overall company goals? So for my organization, let's just say we get a big pop-up store account. Well, if I'm hiring for Costco demo people and they're pretty okay staffed, and I'm not focused on this pop-up store account that needs all of these workers in the next 30 to 60 days, well, my goals aren't prioritized. Are we not looking at quality? Quality. This entire chapter is about quality. I mean, the most important metric, in my opinion, in our 5 attributes of metrics is quality. Do we have a plan? Do we know what that plan is? Do we know how we want to recruit, why we want to recruit? Are we our own internal PR? What's our branding? Are we on social media? What's it look like? What's our Glassdoors look like? Never apply and work for a company without looking at their Glassdoor reviews. The gentleman I interviewed today did something that I have not seen yet. It was fascinating. He actually IM'd via LinkedIn people who had worked for Advantage before and asked them why he quit. And then he found other companies I had worked at and IM'd those people who had worked for me and asked them about me. That was incredible. This is what it is, you guys. This is the new way of business hiring. This is what you're up against in a social media age. So my first knee-jerk gut reaction was, how do I measure that? How do I measure this? What are we going to do to find out those types of things about our managers who are hiring? Because I'm sure he's one of lots of people doing that. The importance of a broader recruiting strategy that people know is really important. It's critical. It's critical that the business is aligned with what you're doing and you're aligned with what the business is doing, because that's why you're here. You need to know what your weaknesses are. So you need to have a good idea of what isn't working and what is working, and that's okay for things not to be working. It's better to know than not to know, because when you can assess what those weaknesses are, you can measure as you're putting in different systems, different processes to fix them. That is huge. And then that leads to the processes. Your goal, every company's goal, is to be an employer of choice, right? I think we know a lot of employers of choices. You can go onto Forbes, you can go onto lots of different Google, search engines to see who is an employer of choice and do I want to work for them. So I will tell you, I have interviewed at companies that say these buzzwords, and it bothers me when people say these buzzwords, because it's not easy to become an employer of choice. You have to do a lot of things, and I mean, the author lines them out of what they are. So I think there's a difference in saying we are or we want to become. I want to work for a place that wants to become an employer of choice, because I want to be part of building that. I want to be part of the story that got them to be the employer of choice. Maybe because I've never worked for a company that is already one, that, I can say that because I've never been in one, but it's really important. There are two things that I want you guys to look at on page 44, and it's number 7 and 8, referral rate and other offers. These are two metrics that I think that get overlooked. Employee referrals should make up over half of your hires, and I just told you, a few minutes ago why. The other big thing is when applicants are applying, how many of them are getting a counter offer from their current firm or another company, and how many of them are taking yours or leaving. Why that's really important is because it kind of shows your pay, your benefits, finding out if you're able to keep or take top talent, or if you're getting it taken from you. You see it a lot in the Silicon Valley. And I know a member of our class mentioned that in one of her discussions. So to me, those are two really important metrics that aren't being measured as much as they should be. And I think that's something that you're going to need to focus on, mostly as the generations are changing within business, because as I just told you today, how I got LinkedIn stalked of my interviewing today. Just remember, you do lose credibility when you overuse metrics, when you use metrics incorrectly, when you don't do something with what you're measuring, if you don't ask what to measure, or if you don't measure anything. But you do lose credibility the most when you tell people you're an employer of choice and you're not, because you and I have probably all worked for organizations, and if they said, oh, we are an employer of choice, you stop to you just whatever. You listen, you ignore, and then you just lose that love, I guess, for who you're working for, right? You lose faith in them. You kind of just stop believing in them because they're not doing what they say. So just be very mindful of that when you're doing your assessments. So the first thing I suggest is look at your practices, your strategies, and your processes. The book has really good checklists that you can use for those. You're not going to be all things to all people. Don't get overwhelmed. And then you're going to want to focus on one or two things within those that you're going to want to be gung-ho and fix. If you're not in HR, or you're not in a place of HR to impact this, I still want you to do it, because I think it's important to know. It's good to have that kind of ammunition in your back pocket. And this function to me has the most amount of metrics that you can measure, and they're easier to put that story together with those 5 attributes. So if you can start doing it in this function as we go through the next 6 weeks, and more important, just as you actually do this in practice, it's going to help you. So let's talk about your current practices in a little more depth. You want to make sure that you are part of the solution and not the problem. So the things you need to look at are the things that are in these boxes. Do you know who your competitors are? I don't care if you're in recruiting, but if you're in HR, if you're in any business doing anything, you should always know who your competitors are. Do you reward your managers for attracting and retaining associates? So in your goals and in your annual goal planning and career planning, is there anything around this? Do you have anything that encourages managers and recruiters to attract and retain associates? Do you track the quality of your hire? How do you reward your recruiters? Are more than 50% of your new hires from referrals? How cumbersome is the process? Do line managers help you with recruiting? How do you market? Do you survey, candidates and jobs to see, where are some of our people leaving? Where are people coming from? Is our job description kind of the latest and greatest? Is it cumbersome? Where do you spend your recruiting money? Right? Are you spending it on print ads? Because let me tell you, if you are, you need to move off from that. Are you putting everything on Indeed? Someone in our class had the best example about spending their money and putting it on Indeed because it was quick. And she said that then she realized that only 10% of all these applicants she was getting were even good applicants. That is a fabulous, amazing analysis of, wow, it seemed quick, it seemed wonderful, but it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So that's it, right? That's the epiphany of why metrics are so wonderful. How quick do you make hiring decisions? Do you make people come back 50 times? Do you guys powwow and calibrate once and move on? Or is it, a cumbersome process of talking to everyone and their mother and not knowing and oohing and ahhing and hemming and hawing? I mean, those types of things. Remember, when you are taking a long time to fill a job, it's costing the company money. So you don't want to move on the wrong person, but you definitely want to have kind of that ticked and tied process and approach. How do you prioritize the jobs that you want to fill? And do you survey your line managers? So you definitely do want to do some of the soft metrics. And I hope I didn't overemphasize on the last week that doing soft metrics was bad, because they're not. It is important, right? How people feel is a feeling. You can't dismiss that. So if the line managers feel that you're giving them good candidates, and then you can prove it, right? There's two huge wins. If they feel you're giving them bad candidates and you can prove, well, here's how they are doing, you can help find out why do they feel that way. Maybe it's tone or approach, or just it's a clash of people personalities, not so much on the type of help that you're getting for them or recruiting for them. So I want you to look at, are you part of the problem? Are you part of the solution? I want you to make sure that you're using effective tools and practices in your recruiting. So next is building your strategy. And again, if you're not in recruiting, you definitely don't need to build a strategy for the whole company. But can I tell you, I'm not in recruiting, and I actually have a written out recruiting strategy for me, myself, and my team. And I think I went over it with you guys. So the recruiting plan needs to align with the business plan. So my recruiting plan aligns with the business plan because we are really big at making sure that when we hire people at Advantage, that they fit in culturally with the company. So that's why my plan requires every team member to interview the person. I make sure it's one interview. So you're going to be with me for a couple hours, and I make sure that we ask only legal questions, all those good things, right? Because that's important, and I don't want to dismiss that. And a lot of what I'm talking about is going to assume that you are doing I-9s correctly, that you are hiring people correctly, that you are making sure that you are being non-discriminatory, and that you already have those basic metrics in place. And if you don't, then, please start there. You want to make sure you're hiring equally, that you're not only hiring purple people, that you are paying fairly, that 25-year-olds aren't getting paid less than a 50-year-old, or a 60-year-old isn't getting paid less than a 25-year-old because of age, all those different things. So please do those things correctly. And if you feel I need to focus more on that, please let me know, and I can definitely redirect the course a little bit on some of those, on those areas. But I want to talk about the business plan. As I told you, for me, I have a written business plan for my team that says, we're not going to hire people who are solely based off of a resume, which they talk about, right, in the book. We're going to bring people in who have either come from organizations that we want to steal their best practices from, people, as I've said, who are scrappy and resourceful. I love to help people who are in college and people who are new grads in the HR field, because it's hard to get your foot in the door. I also love to help people who are trying a new career jump, right? They're going from one career to another. You see a lot of maybe stay-at-home moms who are trying to get back into the workforce. So while I don't ask those questions, I mean, I see those things on resumes and those appeal to me because I feel like those are just really good attributes of people who are hungry to work and, and get that learn that they want. So those are important to me. We like to build strong metrics and benchmarks and prioritize those goals. So we don't have a ton of metrics in my team. We definitely do have a few strong ones. We look at, on my team, number one, the time to fill. From the time that we put a rec out, because I do my own recruiting at Advantage. I don't outsource it to our recruiting function. And then when they start and what that looks like in between. So how long did that take? And then we measure their quality. Where are they at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days compared to the team before them? I also do, the customer service satisfaction metrics is we do weekly check-ins, and I have a five question survey that's basically how are you feeling on these 5 things, so that I can see if we need to slow down, speed up, and is this working? You really want to look at results metrics. So how are people performing? Retention metrics are huge. So those are some of the longer term metrics that we're going to talk about in a minute. But are they staying and how long are they staying? They're quality metrics. So how are they doing in their job? How quickly are they performing their job? So are they being able to give the results and do it effectively within the cultural norms? And then improvement metrics. So those are things, what could we do better? How could we hire better, faster? How can we hire more efficiently? That's looking at things like the paper application. And then, of course, the customer satisfaction. Do the managers like who you're giving? Are you giving too many resumes, not enough resumes? This sometimes can be manager specific, and you want to talk with them and you want to understand what are their expectations. Our recruiting team talks with me. They know that I want them to hire the rec, but I do not want them to source for me. And so we've come to that alignment. So at the very end, they track all the applicants I've seen, the resumes I've looked at to track all those legal requirement things for me, and they make sure I'm hiring at the right pay and all that other good stuff. But we've had that conversation. These will drive you becoming a leader in your field, because managers will start to own the function of recruiting. I mean, they might not source the candidates or put them on LinkedIn or whatever you're doing, but what they'll want to do is they're going to want to own the process of interviewing and hiring, just like me, right? I'm not a recruiter. I'm a manager in a function, and I want to own it. I want to own it because I feel like my team's time and attention on training, if it doesn't work, only hurt my team and only hurt the business. So the third one is ensuring compensation, rewards, and philosophies align with the goals. So if you want to attract the best of the best and you're in the Silicon Valley, you better be paying for it. If you're in the retail space, you need to know who your competitors are and what are they paying so that you're in a good benchmark with them. You want to make sure that the compensation and benefits and recruiting team, right, this is that HR silo busting, is aligned, because when they're aligned, you're going to have a stronger recruiting function and the ability to attract the right talent. And then you want to create strong internal and external branding. And we talked about this. This is the PR. This is the day and age of, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you name it. People are going to know. So just make sure that you are looking at what your internal and external branding is. And everyone needs to have the mentality of a headhunter, because your associate is your best advertisement. They also can be your worst adversary. So I talked a lot about becoming an employer of choice, and I do want to focus really on the words and saying it. So please look at those 25 attributes of what says you're an employer of choice. And I want you to pick the 5 that are the most important to you, and I want you to start living it. I want you to live it at work. I want you to live it in your team. And then you can start talking about them, because the conversation has to start happening, and then you can slowly figure out the metrics and the branding that you need to do to help back up, those types of attributes to get on those lists. You want to focus on building a company that is going to become an employer choice by measurement. And that's why you're here in this class, because you will be able to measure your success of all the different things you do. And I want you to celebrate the victories as you're going through it. No one in this class, in my opinion, is going to be able to do everything in every single page and measure every single metric and be spot on, but we all can measure some. And we can all show the value of slight behavioral changes, which is the whole important part about metrics and analytics. And then we can show those victories and be very distinct of where it's helped the business. And remember, not to lose sight that words are not facts. And so many times HR can use their words that come out factual, right? Because we might be seen as the police or, the red tape of the organization. So make sure you have those transparent conversations with your managers. What do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to take from? Who do you want to work for us? Where do you want those names? Our former COO came from Starbucks, and that was a big deal to have a COO that came from Starbucks. And you want more of that. So how do you get that? An employer of choice is a process, and it's a process that you can obtain through metrics. So our next slide are going to talk about, I think, the most important part of, the following pages of the book, which is all on quality. We're going to talk about quality of hire, how do you measure quality of hire, and look at how you get that quote unquote better hire. So as I mentioned, the book has lots of pages, 30 or 40 of them, that are all about the metrics you're going to measure. I'm not going to go over to all of them. You all read the book. But I do want to talk about timing of measurement first, and then I want to talk about the assessing the quality, looking at these 5 things that he assessed for quality of hire metrics. So when you measure things, not just in staffing, but in any facet of the HR life cycle and the employment life cycle, there's going to be things that you can measure immediately. There's things that you're going to want to measure, within 6 months to a year, and then there's things that you're going to want to measure long term. And you're going to want to know what it is that you're measuring in these kind of 3 time horizon measurement cycles. And if you know that you have long-term measurements that you're going to want to measure, and maybe you don't have a good basis or a starting point on some of those, you're going to want to start that now, right? So you'll start tracking it now to do it later. And these are great measurements to have like under your belt. So like in a year from now, when they've seen that you've done these smaller measurements and all of a sudden you're like, wow, look at this big, huge measurement of long-term year-over-year growth and all those good things, people will be really excited. I'm going to give you an example of this type of measurement with staffing. So when I started with Advantage, there was not a total rewards function. There was one person in the team, and they had just turnover that you wouldn't believe. So what I did is I just pulled the titles that were under that department and how long they had been with us, the temp agencies that they had come from, and I created a little Excel sheet that said, okay, here's the number of people that they hired, here's how long the average person lasts. And then what I did was my whole first year, I measured how many people I hired, nobody turned over, and then what we were able to produce. And we didn't use temp agencies because it was kind of a big thing at the time was temp agencies a couple of years ago. And I showed the money that we saved, and that money that we saved, I asked if I could have it to hire another person. And then my next metric was looking at money that we saved within processes that we created, and then could we hire another person. So that's how I built my long-term, intermediate, and immediate goals of my function. So those are the things you're going to want to think about. So let's just talk about individual performance metrics right now. So individual performance metrics are a big deal, right? These are things like customer service scores, right? If you're in customer service, my team gets a customer service score. When we answer a phone call from you, or if we answer an email, you can rate us. Like it's like a little sad face, happy face, medium face. We do the little face things, and we measure that. We measure that, and we follow up if we start seeing trends. Force ranking is really, is a big one that you can do for individual performance. And I think we talked about that in the last chapter of, where are you and compared to your peers, or where are your, subordinates and so forth. So I think that that's an important one. You can look at productivity, right? Sales is really easy to do that. What's the output? What's the sales volume? What's their quotas and all those other things. In HR, I look at things like, how many job aids did they create? How many new processes did they find? I also look for process improvements. It's really big for me, for you to work for me and tell me what's not working and come up with a new solution. So I measure that within my team. How many people are looking proactively at changing what we're doing today to make it more efficient? And did they save time? I want my whole team to be able to work a 30-hour work week, so the other 10 hours we're doing fun, exciting things, and then, one day get to a 24-hour like tactical work week, so the rest of it we're doing cool, strategic, proactive, benefit compensation related items. So then the next thing really is looking at the retention rate. So I did talk about this a couple slides ago. I don't think we give enough time to retention. I think people talk about turnover, but I don't think they talk about retention. This is really important to look at the percentages of hire that are still with the company. So this to me could be an immediate metric and an intermediate and a long term. So I talked about, hiring just people with blood. So if you look at how are we hiring people, and are they staying 30, 60, 90 days? Are they getting hours 30, 60, 90 days? Those are important things to measure, right? Because people aren't getting hours if they're being scheduled, then they're not going to stay, all that other good stuff. So are they staying? Because if they're leaving after 30, 60, 90 days, we've got a quality of hire. If they're leaving after a year, we might have a quality hire. If they're leaving after a year in the same place, we might have a manager that we need to deal with. And then long term, if they're staying 3 to 5 years, well, that might mean a couple things. That might mean you're an organization that is really good at doing practical training, and you train them up and they leave because they go on to other exciting organizations, and maybe you don't have the movement that they need or the exposure that they need. I mean, there's lots of reasons that people do that, but I think that's important to see how long do they stay, 3 to 5 years. The other thing is the people who have been in your organization for 10, 15, 20 years, are they still producing the quality of work that you want? Or are they people who are mediocre that have been there that long? So you want to look at all those different aspects, and that's an easy metric to measure. The next one is manager satisfaction. So again, this is a softer metric, but it's an important metric, because if your managers think that you are helping them hire quality people with the competencies they want, they're going to be more responsive to you and your requests, not just in recruiting, if you are a full HR generalist in all different things. You're going to want to look at the diversity of the people that are being hired, people who are new to the firm, old to the firm, people who have good experience, no experience, and then of course diversity in regards to what people, their ethnicity and their gender and so forth. The other big thing for you to look at is asking the manager how they experience the entire recruiting process. So when they can give you feedback on how they feel that it has gone, it's too fast, it's too slow, it's just right, those are big things. Then you have applicant satisfaction. So I want you to hear the word applicant, not hire. It is important to survey people who you did hire and people who you didn't hire and how they felt the process went, because that's going to give you insight on things like I've joked about, the cumbersome application process, those types of things. And then the next one is the cost of hire, and he talks a lot about cost of hire. It is important to look at the people who have accepted jobs versus the people who haven't, and look at people that you hired within the last year or the people you hired last year, and then benchmark that to see if you are over offering pay, under offering pay, things like that. The cost of hire doesn't need to just be how much you paid someone or how much the HR person worked or the cost for the ad. You can look at a few different things of the cost of hire. So all those things I just mentioned are very important, but you can also look at things like where are they to benchmark, and then how much are they giving you in new product development, added value to the, to the HR team, what are their successes within the first 30, 60, 90 days, those things. There's a list of different cost of hires that aren't just that old school cost of hire. So these are the ways that you are going to assess the quality of your hire. You need to look at different metrics in each of these things. You're probably not going to be able to do them all at once. And you're not going to be able to have an immediate and an intermittent and a long-term not at once unless you're farther along. So if you're not in an HR function today, you can do this as a manager. You can request your HR team to do this for you, and you can show them how, and then you become a savior. If you are in a generalist HR function, start this. Start somewhere on this. Look at maybe retention rates and do some immediate. Talk to your managers, ask them what's their satisfaction. Create a survey. There's plenty of them in here. Start looking at it right here. Look at where are you hiring from? What are the job boards that you're hiring from? What are they producing for you? Is it working? Are you getting the people that you need? How many candidates are you getting? What caliber of the candidates are you giving? Look at those things, and then that's going to help you determine your next steps of where you're going to go for assessing the quality. So everything we do in HR needs to be around bringing value to the business. And what we talked about, the reason we do metrics and we do analytics is because we're trying to either change behavior, we're trying to change culture, which is, behavior. We're trying to ask for something, maybe more money, more training, and we're continually always showing our value. So metrics, calculations, and building your business case. We've talked about the fact that this is the most important part of the HR life cycle, right? The people. People are the most important part of a business. And it's such a cliche because I don't think that every business really gets that. If you and I weren't working, there would be no widget. There would be no one to hire the widget. There would be no one to build. There would be no one to do IT. People are what make a business. And customers won't come unless you have the people that make them happy. There are some companies who get this, right? There are some companies who get this and live this and breathe this, but I think that's like 3 to 5% of companies that truly get this, love this, breathe this. But we're going to get this, love this, breathe this, and we're going to create some business cases and metrics and calculations around it. So remember, we have our 5 attributes. So I want to talk about those 5 attributes in 2 subsets right now. So it's going to be kind of going off the book, but this is going to be real life of what you're going to think through. So let's just talk about our function. Our function. So quality of our function. Are our recruiters hiring quality people? Are they effectively hiring people, or are they hiring warm bodies? You can measure that. What's their time to fill? And how long are those people staying? Right there, boom, done. Quantity. Let's look at internally. How many openings do we have as a company? How long does it take us to fill those openings? What % of those applicants are internal versus external versus referrals? Those will all say things about your company and your organization and how close you are to your, employer of choice, employee value proposition. You can measure those right away. You can measure those numbers right away, and you can tell a story with those. You can say, well, we know Benchmark says that we want 50% of our employees to be referrals, and we're only at 20%. So my suggestion is that we do an employee referral program and we give people $100. And let's do this for 2 months. Let's see how many positions that we can fill, and let's measure the success of how the quality of hire we get out of our associates who are referring. Right there, you just did a 5 attribute. Time or speed, right? We just talked about that. What's our response time? How quickly are we responding to an initial request? How long does it take for us to hire and train and those types of things? And then let's look at customer satisfaction. How satisfied is the candidate? How satisfied is the manager? How satisfied is a new hire? So if you're going to do let's just do one thing, right? Let's just say we're going to put in a retention program. So we want to, a referral program, I'm sorry. So we want to do an employee referral program. So we are going to tell our managers the data we know, the benchmark data we know, that internal candidates who refer quit at a 30% less rate, that when people are referring people, it means that they think it's a great company to work for, that if you have 50% of your hires that are referral, you have a 30 to 40% longer retention rate of your associates. So we want to measure the quality of the hires that we get from our referrals. We want to measure the quantity that we get for our referrals. We want to see if it helps speed up the time to fill. We want to see how satisfied our employees are with this process and our managers. And we want to see the amount of money that we've saved, because maybe you don't have to do as much using placement services and so forth. Right there and then. That is a way that you can measure your internal processes, practices. It's putting it all together we just talked about. Your strategy and your processes and your practices and the tools and the resources. And you've just built a whole 5-case attribute. And you're going to build your business case of why you want to do it. Maybe you work with a small little group for a month, and if it works, guess what? You can launch it full scale. So now let's talk about the immediate, intermittent, and long-term metrics that you can develop with that, right? You can measure immediately what happened, over the 6 months to a year of what happened, and then long-term, over a year over year, what's it looking like? And then from there, you can pull in performance. What was the performance of the associates prior to us doing this referral program, and those who were referred versus those who weren't? You can look at your force ranking. You can look how the managers felt before and after. So on here, I've put various quality, quantity, time, customer service, and money metrics that you can measure. But I think what's important for you to look at is right now in your internal teams and your internal hiring, you've got to put some metrics internally, right? You've got to kind of clean your own house, as I tell my team. Let's keep our house clean before we tell people to clean theirs. And then we're going to look at the quality of our hires in even more depth, because by cleaning your own house, you're going to by nature get a better quality of hire, and you're going to measure those things. Now, as we evolve and we're going to look outside, we're going to work at quality versus just quantity. We're going to look at things like, what are the factors that we use to select people? Do we use scoring? We can look at things like, what is the profit margin of the people that we've spent more money to hire on versus the people we've spent less money to hire on, right? You sometimes get what you pay for. We're going to look at things like, how many counter offers are people getting in key positions, so that we can then build a business case on the benchmark data we get for our pay and our rewards. You do not need to do a peanut butter spread approach to everybody. But what you can focus on is the top key performers, top key jobs, and making sure that the quality of hire in those positions are what the managers want. If you can measure it, you can improve it. So when you're first starting out, it's about putting metrics that might not feel good, because you're going to measure your quality of hire by, are you retaining them? Are you getting good candidates, strong candidates? Where are you getting them from? Are you getting referrals? Are you getting people who have, maybe they quit and now they want to come back because the grass wasn't greener? I also want you to stop looking at the cost of hire, because it's not strategic, but instead look at things like the type of hire and the benefit they're giving it to you, the quality of hire. Calculate the rate of return. So how much money do you spend in recruiting? And then look at the amount of money that the people you have recruited have brought to the business, right? Your CEO is going to want to have lots more recruiters if you can show that the recruiting team is like a $65,000 annual cost, but the people that this recruiter has hired has brought into $20 million in sales. That's a really important thing to look at. What's also important is for you to look at the various positions within your organization to make sure that you are focusing recruiting in the right area. Because if you can determine the output of the average top performer, you can start focusing on how you're going to hire for those positions. Where do you want to recruit from? Where do you want to resource from? The other types of metrics that you can measure here are your bench. How many people do we have that we think are going to retire in the next 5 years, right? Just look at age. How many of those people do we have someone internal that can take their job? And how many of those people do we have someone either on the bench or internal that we can have replace them? That's a really important metric, because if you don't have that, you can go to your leaders and say, we need to focus on recruiting fairs, building in our training programs, right? This is how the recruiting function can help training and development. We need to train and develop because we don't have this bench. And if we don't have this bench right now, the industry, it's a 3-4% unemployment rate. I mean, people with jobs are looking for jobs, and you're going to have to pay for that. So that means that your top talent's probably also being sourced. So you want to be able to have those types of conversations with your managers as you're going through all these different things. So when we talk about just metrics in general, at the very end of the book, he talks about retention metrics. He talks about metrics that are like key metrics that you can have for your organization. I don't think it is smart to do every single one of them. I've said that now a few times. But what I do think is smart is for you to take a couple of them. It's smart for you to look at a few of those different metrics and say, okay, how do I want to measure our competitiveness? How do I want to measure our retention? Or do I want to measure it, right? Maybe it's just measuring it for the first time. How about our turnover? Who is quitting and where are they going? That's important to measure, and you can tell a story with that. You can also say, who are we recruiting from? My organization personally, we recruit a lot from retail. We kind of take from one particular retail person a lot. Quite frequently we take from this particular retail person. So it's like thinking to ourselves, I'm sure if someone on their end would measure that, they would start finding out, why are you going to Advantage versus staying with us? We do that here. We look, where are people going? A lot of times for us, our people go to our customers, right? We service Costco and Walmart and Target and Sephora and Home Depot and Amazon and so forth. So it gets a little sketchy, right? Because we don't want to upset our client and our customer. But that's where I was talking about, where you train them up and then they leave you. So why are they leaving us and not wanting us to stay here? So we've evolved, right? We're on a next step of trying to figure out where are and why are people going. So my organization, we focus a lot on the college recruit. And so I think that's a good segue for my final slide. So some of my final thoughts, right? As I was saying, that we focus on college recruits a lot in my organization as well, because we as a company love the fact that we can train the new people in the industry and not just college, people who are coming into the industry maybe from a different field. And we're okay knowing that they'll go to our customers or our clients, because guess what? Our customers and our clients love us for it. If they feel that we're such a good partner that we can end up giving them some of our staff, we're really good at having a good bench. We look at the number of resumes that we get from colleges, and we look at the percentages of those that we hire, and then we look at, how many of them have we offered, and what schools are we taking from, and are they ones in the hospitality industry, the retail industry, the HR industry, the IT industry. We have ad agencies, so we really look at some of the sexy, cool schools that do those types of things. And, where are we from a network standpoint? Something in finance that I think is an amazing discovery. If you've worked in finance or know anyone who worked in finance, they're going to love either like PwC or Deloitte, really, for big firms to help with your taxes and auditing and SOX notices and SEC filings. It's usually PwC or Deloitte. PwC and Deloitte are known for hiring people very young. They pay them very well, and you work like a dog. But most of those people go on to work for the clients that they have consulted for. And then guess what? When they now are a CFO or a VP of finance or a controller, they hire PwC or Deloitte to come in to do their consulting. So they've created almost this alumni association of prior workers who use them for consultants. And my company does something very similar, and we're okay with that. And it's pretty awesome and pretty amazing. So what's important to know is that you become an employer choice over time. It's important to know that hiring and retaining top performers is a no-brainer, but it's something that we don't focus enough on. It's important to know that the cost of a vacant position is going to be the largest financial impact to your business, but then hiring just a warm body is the second. It's important to know that you need to inventory your team. You need to start small, and you will make a big impact. This section has a laundry list of things that you can measure. In your homework, I ask you to start putting it into play. Actually do it. Actually create some metrics. Because the more you do it and you see how it works together and you have these, fictitious or use what you're doing right now, it will help you put it all together and how compensation and benefits and training and learning, you will all need to work together, or you as an HR generalist will want to pull in all of those things to make your bigger story. So while you're going to have individual metrics in each of these areas of your life cycle, they all build upon each other. So with that, have a great week. If you would like to talk through your metrics, or you want to email me, or you want to brainstorm as you're going through them, please do so. I am very excited about this week's homework assignments. You have your first putting it together. I am here. I'm around. I check every single day. So please don't hesitate to ask, and I hope you guys have a great week.